The sterile, recycled air of JFK's Terminal 4 hummed with the promise of a new life. Catherine Bishop clutched her passport, her heart thrumming with an excitement that mirrored the roar of jets outside. Barcelona. The word itself tasted of sunshine and sangria. She and her husband Ethan had saved for this for 3 years, a grand escape, a fresh start. The final boarding call for their flight echoed through the concourse. She looked at her phone, a giddy smile on her face, ready to text him one last "hurry up." But a message from him was already there. 3 sentences that would detonate her world in the most public, humiliating way possible, leaving her stranded as her future flew away without her. The dream of Barcelona had been built brick by loving brick, over 1,000 shared dinners and whispered late-night conversations. It was to be the culmination of everything Catherine and Ethan Cole had worked for. For 10 years, she had been the steady bedrock of their marriage, an accomplished architect at a mid-sized New York firm. Her salary had provided their stability, while Ethan, a charismatic financial analyst, always seemed to be chasing the next big, elusive deal. He was the dreamer, she was the builder. It was a dynamic that from the outside looked like a perfect partnership. "Just imagine it, Kate," he'd said, spreading a map of the Gothic Quarter on their small dining table. "Our own little apartment with a balcony. You can finally open that boutique consultancy you've always wanted. No more designing strip malls for soulless corporations. You'll be creating art. And I'll find investment opportunities. We'll be free." She had believed him. She had poured her heart into the logistics, her savings into their joint Barcelona fund, and her professional passion into a groundbreaking proposal she planned to develop once they were settled, a sustainable, community-focused urban living concept. It was her masterpiece, the project that would define her career. Ethan had been her biggest cheerleader, or so she thought. He'd read every draft, offered suggestions, and called it their golden ticket. The day of the flight was a blur of frantic energy and joyful anticipation. They'd sold their car, put their furniture in storage, and packed their lives into 4 oversized suitcases. At the airport, the chaos felt electric. Ethan handled the check-in, a charming smile plastered on his face as he joked with the airline staff. "You go on through security, babe," he said, giving her a quick, almost perfunctory kiss on the cheek. "I just need to make a quick call to my old boss. Wish him well. I'll meet you at the gate. Gate B24. Don't leave without me." She'd laughed. "Never." She navigated the winding lines of security, her mind already picturing the sun-drenched streets of their new home. She found a seat with a clear view of the gate, watching the crew prepare the massive Airbus A330 that would carry them across the Atlantic. 10 minutes passed, then 20. The pre-boarding announcement for families with small children began. She texted him, "Boarding soon. Where are you getting nervous?" No reply. The zones for boarding were called one by one. Her zone was next. She stood up, craning her neck, scanning the bustling crowds for his familiar handsome face. Nothing. A knot of anxiety began to twist in her stomach. She called him. It went straight to voicemail. That was odd. His phone was never off. "Final boarding call for Flight 84 to Barcelona." The overhead speaker announced, the voice detached and impersonal. Panic, cold and sharp, began to prickle at her skin. She showed her ticket to the gate agent, her voice trembling slightly. "My husband, he was right behind me. Ethan Cole. Has he boarded?" The agent, a woman named Mariah, with tired but wound eyes, scanned her computer. Her brow furrowed. "I'm sorry, ma'am. Mr. Cole's ticket was scanned about 20 minutes ago. He's on the plane. The world tilted. It made no sense. He was on the plane. How could he be on the plane without her? Maybe he'd rushed on thinking she was ahead of him. She fumbled with her phone again, her hands shaking so badly she could barely unlock it. And then she saw it. The message that had arrived 7 minutes earlier buried in her panicked flurry of calls. From Ethan. It read, "Kate, I'm so sorry it has to be this way. I can't do this anymore. The life we planned, it's not the life I want. My ticket was upgraded. I'm already on board. Please don't make a scene. The papers are with my lawyer. He'll be in touch." The phone slipped from her grasp and clattered to the polished floor. The words didn't compute. They were just a nonsensical jumble. Upgraded lawyer. The gate agent was speaking to her, her voice sounding like it was coming from underwater. "Ma'am? Are you all right, ma'am? We have to close the gate." The jet bridge was pulling away from the aircraft. Her flight, her life. It was detaching itself from her, pushing back into a world she was no longer a part of. She could see the plane through the vast window, a monstrous white whale. And inside it was her husband of 10 years, a man who had kissed her goodbye with a lie on his lips. A sob, raw and violent, ripped from her throat. The carefully constructed facade of her life didn't just crack. It exploded, leaving her exposed and utterly alone in the merciless fluorescent glare of John F. Kennedy International Airport. She was stranded with a useless one-way ticket in her hand and a heart that had been surgically removed without anesthesia. Humiliation is a uniquely public poison. Catherine felt its venom seep into her as the sympathetic but firm gate agent guided her away from the window. The eyes of other passengers, a mixture of pity, curiosity, and annoyance, were like physical blows. She was the woman left behind, the cliché, a discarded piece of luggage. Maria, the agent, led her to a small, quiet seating area away from the main concourse. "Is there anyone I can call for you?" Maria asked, her voice soft. Catherine could barely form a thought, let alone a sentence. Her mind was a slideshow of horrors. Ethan sitting in a plush business-class seat, sipping champagne. Ethan deleting her photos from his phone. Ethan turning to the person next to him. Was he alone? The thought was a fresh stab of pain. Her family. She needed to call her family. Her parents were retired and living in Florida 1,000 miles away. Her older sister lived in Chicago. And then there was Adrian Pierce, her cousin, her mother's sister's son. They had been inseparable as children, partners in crime during awkward teenage years, but life had pulled them in different directions. He was a pilot, a captain for a major international airline. He was based out of London but flew all over the world. They hadn't spoken in months, save for the odd family text chain. He always seemed so far away, so airborne. A man who lived in the sky. With trembling fingers, she called her mother. The conversation was a choked, incoherent mess of sobs and fragmented sentences. Her mother, bless her heart, went into full matriarch mode, her panic and rage a comforting if distant shield. "That monster, I never trusted him, Adrian. I'm going to call Adrian's mother. He's a pilot, Catherine. He'll know what to do. He'll help you." An hour crawled by. Catherine sat catatonically, the airport's rhythm of arrivals and departures a cruel mockery of her own static despair. Her phone buzzed. An unknown UK number. She answered it with a weak, "Hello." Kate, it's Adrian. Aunt Carol just called my mum. What the hell is going on? Where are you? His voice was a lifeline. Deep calm and radiating an authority she hadn't heard since they were kids, and he was convincing her to jump off the high dive. JFK, she whispered. Terminal 4, Gate B24. Stay right there. Don't move. I'm at JFK. I just landed from Frankfurt. I'm coming to find you. The coincidence was so staggering it felt like a miracle. Of all the airports in the world, he was here. 10 minutes later, a figure in a crisp, dark pilot's uniform strode toward her, weaving through the crowds with an effortless command. Captain Adrian Pierce was tall and broad-shouldered, with sharp blue eyes that held a mixture of deep concern and simmering fury. He looked less like a commercial pilot and more like a fighter pilot from a movie. He knelt in front of her, ignoring his rolling suitcase. "Kate," he said gently, his eyes scanning her tear-streaked face. "Talk to me." She told him everything. The Barcelona dream, the sold car, the packed life, the joint bank account, and the final devastating text message. As she spoke, his expression hardened, his jaw tightening until the muscle ticked. He wasn't just listening. He was absorbing her pain and converting it into cold, focused anger. "The man is a coward," Adrian said, his voice a low growl. "A gutless, pathetic coward." He stood up, pulling her to her feet. "Right, first things first. We're getting you out of here. My crew is staying at the TWA hotel tonight, before our flight to London tomorrow. You're coming with me. We'll get you a room." "I can't," she stammered. "My bags." Ethan checked them all under his name. Adrian's eyes narrowed. Of course he did. He pulled out his phone and made a call. "This is Captain Pierce. Get me Operations Manager David Chen now." "David Adrian Pierce here. I have a personal situation involving a passenger and mishandled baggage on Flight 84 to BCN. My cousin. Yes, it's a delicate domestic matter. I need those bags pulled in Barcelona and held. Tag them as Do Not Release. I'll handle the authorization." He hung up and looked at her. "Done. He won't be able to just waltz out of the airport with your life's possessions. Now your finances." Dread washed over her. She pulled up her banking app. The Barcelona fund, which had held over $85,000, her entire life's savings, plus proceeds from selling their assets, was empty. A single transfer had been made at 8:00 a.m. that morning, to a private account in Ethan's name only. He hadn't just left her. He had systematically stripped her of everything. The shock was so profound, it left her breathless. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision. This was a calculated, premeditated act of cruelty. Adrian saw the look on her face and swore under his breath. He put a firm, steadying arm around her ear. "Okay, Kate. This changes things. This isn't just a breakup. This is theft. This is war." He guided her toward the exit, his presence a solid, unshakable wall against the chaos surrounding them. "He thinks because he's in the air, he's untouchable. He's forgotten something. I live in the air, and from up there, you can see everything." The TWA hotel was a retro-futuristic bubble, a stark contrast to the sterile functionality of the main terminals. In the quiet of the suite Adrian had secured for her, the full weight of her situation began to crush Catherine. Every detail of Ethan's betrayal was a fresh wound. He hadn't just stolen her money. He'd stolen her future. He'd stolen her trust. He'd even stolen her clothes. She was left with nothing but the outfit she was wearing and a handbag. Adrian, however, was a whirlwind of controlled action. He ordered room service, handing her a bottle of water and insisting she eat. While she picked numbly at a club sandwich, he was on his laptop, his brow furrowed in concentration. "He's an idiot, but he's a confident idiot," Adrian said more to himself than to her. "He thinks he's covered all his tracks, but people like him always leave a trail. What can we even do?" Catherine asked, her voice hollow. "He's on his way to Spain. The money is gone. He'll just disappear." Adrian turned the laptop toward her. "He won't disappear. People like Ethan don't want to disappear. They want to reinvent themselves. They want to be seen. The question is, why Barcelona?" It was then that Catherine remembered. The project, her architectural proposal, the golden ticket, as he had called it. My work. She breathed a new wave of nausea washing over her. "I've been developing a concept for the past 2 years, a modular, sustainable urban housing project. It's innovative, and I think it's brilliant. Ethan, he knew everything about it. He helped me edit the proposal. I had a printed copy in my carry-on, which he insisted on taking, because his was too full." Adrian's eyes lit up with a dangerous fire. "And a digital copy, on my laptop, which is in one of those suitcases he checked. So he has the only finished copies of your intellectual property." Adrian stated, his voice grim. "This wasn't just about leaving you. He needed a brilliant idea to launch his new life, and he decided to steal yours. The audacity of it was breathtaking. He hadn't just abandoned her. He had plundered her mind. That pain was deeper than the financial betrayal. It was a violation of her very soul." "We have to stop him," Catherine said, a spark of anger finally cutting through the fog of her grief. "We stop him isn't a plan," Adrian countered, his pilot's mind already running through checklists and contingencies. "A plan has objectives, resources, and a timeline. Objective 1, prove he stole your money and your project. Objective 2, retrieve or neutralize your assets. Objective 3, ensure he faces consequences that he can't charm his way out of." He started typing furiously. "He'll need to present your project to someone. Investors, a development firm. He's a good talker, but he doesn't have the technical knowledge to withstand serious scrutiny. He's going to find a back door." He paused, his fingers hovering over the keyboard. "Who does he know in Spain? Any old friends? Colleagues?" Catherine's mind raced. Ethan was charming, but had few close friends. His professional network was, as she was now realizing, likely as fabricated as his devotion to her. Then a name surfaced. Sofia Martinez, a junior analyst who had worked at his firm a year ago. She was from a wealthy family in Barcelona and had moved back home. Ethan had mentioned her in passing, calling her a sweet kid. At the time it seemed innocent. Now it felt sinister. "Sofia Martinez," Catherine said. "He told me she connected him with some people at her father's company. Martinez Holdings. It's a real estate development firm." Adrian's fingers flew across the keys. A few clicks later, the website for Martinez Holdings filled the screen. It was a major player in European urban development. "And there it is," Adrian said, pointing to a banner on their site. "The Future of Urban Living Symposium. Barcelona. In 3 days. They're a primary sponsor. He's not just running away, Kate. He's running to something. He's going to pass your work off as his own at that symposium." The pieces clicked into place, forming a picture of a betrayal so intricate and cruel it was almost a work of art. The timeline, the stolen project, the contact in Barcelona, it was all a meticulously orchestrated heist of her life. Catherine looked at her cousin, at the grim determination etched on his face. "What do we do?" Adrian closed the laptop and leaned forward, his blue eyes locking onto hers. "Tomorrow morning my flight leaves for London Heathrow. From there it's a 2-hour jump to Barcelona. You're going to be on it. He left you at an airport thinking you were grounded forever. He's wrong. We're going to use my world, the world of schedules, logistics, and international access to beat him at his own game. He thinks he's flying high. We're about to create some serious turbulence." The flight to London was surreal. Catherine sat in a first-class pod, a world away from the economy seat she was supposed to be in. Adrian in the cockpit was an unseen but powerful presence. Before takeoff, he'd come back to her seat, not in his captain's uniform, but in a simple pullover, looking like her cousin again. "Get some rest," he'd said. "When we land, the fight begins. I've already made some calls." True to his word, the moment they landed at Heathrow and checked into the Sofitel connected to Terminal 5, Adrian transformed his hotel room into a war room. He had contacts Catherine couldn't have imagined. A former Royal Air Force intelligence officer who now ran a private cybersecurity firm. A sharp-tongued financial investigator he'd met at a conference in Dubai. A high-powered corporate lawyer in London who was the sister of one of his first officers. The first call was to the cybersecurity expert, a man named Gavin. Adrian put him on speakerphone. "Gavin, I need you to build me a digital ghost." Adrian explained, his voice crisp and clear. "Ethan Cole. I need to know every financial move he's made in the last 6 months. Credit cards, loan applications, new bank accounts. He's just landed in Barcelona. I want to know if he booked a hotel, if he rented a car, who he's called." "Consider it done, Captain." Gavin's voice crackled back. "Give me 12 hours. The next call was to Jennifer Albright, the lawyer. Catherine, on Adrian's insistence, explained the situation. The stolen money, the house she now realized, was probably leveraged to its breaking point, and the intellectual property theft. "This is not just a divorce, Catherine," Jennifer said, her voice sharp and reassuringly expensive. "This is felony fraud and larceny. The key will be proving the architectural plans are yours. Do you have any preliminary draft sketches, metadata on old files? Anything with a timestamp that predates his theft?" Catherine's heart sank. "It was all on my laptop, the one he took." "Think, Kate," Adrian urged gently. "You're a meticulous planner. You must have backups somewhere." And then a flicker of memory. 6 months ago, her work computer had crashed. The firm's IT department had recovered her files, but for a week she had worked from home, saving backups of everything to a personal cloud drive she barely used. A drive she hadn't touched since. She gave the login details to Adrian, who passed them on to Gavin. While Gavin worked his digital magic, Adrian turned his attention to Catherine herself. "Right now, you're a victim," he said, his tone blunt, but not unkind. "And Ethan will smell that from a mile away. He'll use it, twist it, make you look unstable if you confront him. We need to change the narrative. When you walk into that symposium in Barcelona, you can't be Catherine Cole, the abandoned wife. You need to be Catherine Bishop, the brilliant architect." He booked her an appointment at a high-end salon at the airport, followed by a personal shopping session at Harrods. "This isn't about vanity," he explained. "It's about armor. It's about reclaiming your confidence." A few hours later, a different woman looked back at Catherine from the mirror. Her hair was styled in a sleek, powerful cut. She was dressed in a perfectly tailored blazer, sharp trousers, and heels that made her feel taller, stronger. The fragile, heartbroken woman from JFK was gone, replaced by someone who looked focused and formidable. That evening, Gavin called back. The information he'd uncovered was staggering. Your husband is a piece of work, Gavin began. He's been building a financial escape hatch for over a year. He took out a second mortgage on your house 6 months ago, forged your signature. He has maxed out 10 credit cards in your name, all opened with online applications sent to a P.O. box he controlled. The $85,000 from your joint account was just the final piece. He's laundered it through 2 offshore accounts and consolidated it into a new bank in Barcelona. He's not just broke, he's hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt, and he's pinned it all on you. Catherine felt sick. The betrayal was deeper and darker than she could have imagined. But here's the good news, Gavin continued. I got into that cloud drive. It's a gold mine. Drafts of your Ethelgard project. Is that it dating back 2 years? Every version, every note, every clumsy sketch. The metadata is pristine. It's an unshakable digital paper trail that proves you are the sole creator. I've packaged it all in a secure file for your lawyer. There is no doubt. He stole your work. A wave of relief so powerful it almost buckled her knees washed over Catherine. She had proof. There's more, Gavin said, a hint of excitement in his voice. He's cocky. He used the hotel Wi-Fi at El Prat Airport to download your final proposal from his email onto a new tablet. He's staying at the Mandarin Oriental Barcelona, same hotel as the symposium, and he booked a dinner reservation for 2 tonight at a restaurant called Disfrutar. The other name on the reservation, Sofia Martinez. Adrian looked at Catherine, a slow, predatory smile spreading across his face. He's not even trying to hide. He thinks he's already won. He picked up his phone and dialed the British Airways booking line. Yes, I need 2 first-class one-way tickets on the first flight to Barcelona tomorrow morning. He looked at Catherine, who nodded, her eyes blazing with a newfound resolve. The game is on, Adrian said into the phone, and we're changing the rules. Barcelona was breathtaking, a city of whimsical architecture and vibrant life that felt like a slap in the face. This was supposed to be her city, her new beginning with the man she loved. Now, it was a battlefield. They checked into the Hotel Arts, a sleek modern tower with a commanding view of the Mediterranean, and more importantly, a direct view of the Mandarin Oriental across the city. It felt like an observation post. With Jennifer Albright's guidance, they had a clear legal strategy, but Adrian knew that a legal victory months down the line wasn't enough. Ethan needed to be publicly and professionally decimated. The symposium is our stage, Adrian declared, pacing their suite. He's going to present your Ethelgard project as his own. He'll have memorized the executive summary and the flashy parts, but he won't know the why. He doesn't have your soul, your passion for it. The symposium's schedule was available online. Ethan Cole, financial strategist and urban futurist, was slated to present on the final day in a prime afternoon slot. He's billing himself as a futurist. Catherine scoffed, a bitter laugh escaping her lips. The only future he can predict is his own. And we're going to make it a short one, Adrian replied. He was on the phone again this time to an old friend who was a senior marketing director for a rival airline and a major sponsor of the symposium. Adrian was cashing in a decade's worth of professional favors in a single day. Michael, it's Adrian Pierce. I'm in a bit of a bind and need a miracle. Yes, the symposium in Barcelona. There's been a last-minute cancellation, hasn't there? The speaker from the Oslo group had a family emergency. I have his replacement. A brilliant architect, Catherine Bishop. Yes, from New York. She has a revolutionary sustainable housing concept that will blow the roof off the place. Perfect. What time slot is available? Adrian listened, a grin spreading across his face. He covered the receiver and looked at Catherine. There's an opening. The morning of the final day. 3 hours before Ethan is scheduled to speak. This was it. The ultimate gambit. It wasn't enough to expose him after the fact. They would preempt him entirely. She would present her own work in all its glory hours, before he could attempt to unveil his stolen, hollow version. By the time he walked on stage, he would already be a fraud. Panic and exhilaration warred within Catherine. Can I do it? I don't have my full presentation, my models, my slides. Gavin has the files, Adrian said calmly. We have the next 36 hours. We will rebuild your presentation from scratch. Better. Stronger. I'll get a design team from Michael's company to help. You know this project inside and out, Kate. You didn't just design it. You birthed it. All you have to do is tell its story. The next day and a half were a blur of intense caffeine-fueled work. A team of graphic designers, connected remotely via a secure link, worked with Catherine to build a stunning visual presentation from the raw files Gavin had recovered. They created 3D renderings and animations that brought her sketches to life in a way she had only dreamed of. Adrian acted as her project manager, her coach and her unwavering source of strength. He drilled her, asking tough questions, playing devil's advocate, forcing her to hone every point until her delivery was flawless. During a short break, Catherine stood on the balcony of their suite, looking out at the city lights. Why are you doing all this, Adrian? You've dropped everything. You're calling in favors that must have taken years to earn. Adrian came and stood beside her, leaning on the railing. When we were kids, he began, his voice softer now. You were the one who always stood up for me when the older boys tried to pick on me. You were fearless. You taught me that you never, ever let a bully win. He looked at her, his expression serious. This guy, Ethan, he's a bully of the worst kind. He tried to break you to make you small and helpless. He will not win. Not on my watch. The evening before the presentation, they did a dry run in the suite with Adrian as the audience. Catherine was no longer just reciting facts and figures. She spoke with a passion that was captivating. She told the story of the Ethelgard project, named after a historical term, for a noble dwelling, explaining how it combined ancient principles of community with cutting-edge green technology. It wasn't just a building. It was a philosophy. Perfect, Adrian said when she finished. Now for the final piece of the puzzle. He handed her a small, elegant business card he'd had printed that afternoon. It read, Catherine Bishop, Principal Architect and Founder, Ethelgard Designs. You said you wanted to open your own boutique consultancy, he said with a small smile. Consider this your grand opening. Catherine took the card, the sharp edges feeling real and solid in her hand. She wasn't just taking back her project. She was taking back her name, her future. Tomorrow she wouldn't just be exposing a thief. She would be launching her dream. The grand ballroom of the Mandarin Oriental was less a conference hall and more an ecosystem of power. The air cooled to a precise temperature, hummed with a multilingual murmur of ambition, as some of the most influential figures in European architecture and development networked over delicate pastries and steaming cups of coffee. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, glinting off expensive watches, and the sleek architectural models displayed on pedestals. For Catherine, standing in the wings of the stage, it felt like the most intimidating arena on earth. A cold, heavy knot of stage fright had settled in her stomach, a physical manifestation of the immense risk she was about to take. This wasn't just a presentation. It was a public verdict on her life's work and her personal crusade. Then, through a gap in the crowd, she saw Adrian. He was seated in the third row, looking utterly at ease in this sea of titans, as calm as if he were running through a pre-flight checklist. He caught her gaze and gave her a single, subtle nod, a silent transmission of strength and confidence that cut through her fear. It was the same look he'd given her when they were 12, right before she attempted a dive she was sure she couldn't make. "You've got this." She took a deep, steadying breath, the scent of coffee and perfume filling her lungs. She smoothed the lapels of her tailored blazer. It was her armor. Today she was not a victim. She was Catherine Bishop, the principal architect and founder of Ethelgard Designs. She belonged here more than anyone. Her eyes scanned the room and found him. Ethan. He was positioned near the front, the center of a small, wrapped circle. He was leaning back in his chair, a picture of relaxed charisma, his arm draped possessively around the shoulders of Sophia Martinez. He was tanned, handsome, and radiating the unearned confidence of a man who believed he held a royal flush. He laughed at something someone said, a bright, easy sound that used to warm her heart. Now it was the sound of betrayal. For a fleeting, agonizing moment, the sight of him so carefree, so completely detached from the wreckage he had caused, sent a sharp spear of the old pain through her. But then it was gone, incinerated by the cold, diamond-hard resolve that had taken its place. He was not a man to be mourned. He was a fraud to be exposed. "And now," the moderator's voice boomed from the speakers, pulling her from her thoughts, "to present a fascinating new concept in urban ecology. Please welcome a rising talent from New York, Ms. Catherine Bishop." The walk from the wings to the center stage lectern felt like a mile. The sound of her heels on the polished wood floor was the only thing she could hear over the pounding in her ears. 100 conversations paused. 100 heads turned. As she passed Ethan's row, their eyes met. The moment was electric. His charming smile faltered, replaced by a flicker of cognitive dissonance. He saw her, he knew her face, but the context was wrong. This poised, formidable woman in the power suit didn't align with the tear-streaked broken wife he had abandoned on the floor of JFK. His expression shifted from confusion to a flash of irritation, as if a ghost from a past life had inconveniently appeared at his coronation party. He gave a slight dismissive shake of his head and turned back to Sophia, whispering something that made her laugh. He had dismissed her. It was his final, fatal mistake. Catherine reached the lectern, the bright stage lights washing over her, erasing the audience into a sea of shadowy faces. She placed her hands on the cool wood, took a deep breath, and began her voice, clear and unwavering, carrying to every corner of the room. "Good morning. My name is Catherine Bishop, and I believe that the buildings we live in should not just shelter us. They should sustain us. They should connect us. They should tell a story of a better future." She clicked the remote, and the first slide, a stunning 3D rendering of the Ethelgard complex at sunrise, filled the massive screen behind her. A collective murmur of appreciation went through the room. She launched into the presentation, not as a rote speech, but as a deeply personal story. The slides, more dynamic and beautiful than she could have imagined, flowed seamlessly. She didn't just present a project. She wove a narrative, her authentic passion a stark contrast to the hollow performance Ethan had surely rehearsed. She spoke of the inspiration, the memory of her grandmother's small community garden in Queens, a vibrant green oasis in a concrete world. "That garden," she explained, "taught me that community isn't a feature, It's a foundation. She spoke of the wasted energy she observed in modern cities, calling it a slow-motion crisis of inefficiency. She explained the complex closed-loop water reclamation system and the photovoltaic skin of the buildings with an effortless command of the engineering. She knew every weld, every window placement, every watt of power saved, because she had agonized over every single one. From the corner of her eye, she tracked the slow-motion implosion occurring in the third row. Ethan was no longer laughing. He was leaning forward, his earlier ease replaced by a rigid, disbelieving posture. When she put up a slide detailing the project's financial modeling, he physically recoiled as if struck. He recognized the numbers. He had praised those very projections. Sophia, sensing his distress, looked from Catherine on the stage to the screen and then back to Ethan. Her brow furrowed in confusion. A silent, frantic argument was beginning a pantomime of dawning horror. He was staring at the screen at Catherine's name next to the Ethelgard logo, with the wide-eyed terror of a man watching his own execution in real time. He was watching his stolen golden ticket, his entire fabricated future being presented with unassailable authority by its true creator. Catherine saved her masterstroke, the public checkmate, for the very end. Her tone shifted, becoming colder, more precise. "The journey of creation is a long one," she said, her voice steady and clear as she let her gaze drift over the audience before locking directly onto Ethan. "It begins not with a polished blueprint, but with a spark, a sketch on a napkin, a late-night idea that refuses to let you sleep." She clicked the remote one last time. The slick corporate branding vanished from the screen, replaced by a scanned image of a simple, hand-drawn sketch on a sheet of notebook paper. It was the very first drawing she had ever made of the Ethelgard Tower, rough, filled with her own messy handwriting and frantic arrows pointing to technical notes. And there, in the bottom right corner, generated automatically by the cloud server, where the file had been stored for 2 years, was a pristine, unforgeable timestamp. The effect on the room was immediate. A sharp collective intake of breath was audible. The murmuring started a ripple of understanding that quickly grew into a wave. They were not just architects and developers. They were creators. They understood the sanctity of the process. They understood what they were seeing. "Every step is documented." Catherine continued, her voice resonating with cold power as she held Ethan's horrified gaze. "Every draft, every failure, every breakthrough. Because true innovation isn't stolen. It is earned. It is lived. It has a history, a verifiable, unchangeable history." She said nothing more. She didn't need to. The silence that followed was more damning than any accusation. Then the room erupted. The applause wasn't just polite. It was a thunderous, standing ovation. A roar of validation that washed over her, cleansing the last remnants of her doubt and pain. As the moderator came up to shake her hand, his face beaming, a dozen people were already on their feet, moving toward the stage with business cards extended. But a path was cleared for a distinguished, silver-haired man who strode forward with an air of absolute command. "Ms. Bishop," he said, his Spanish accent thick, but his English perfect. His eyes were sharp, missing nothing. "That was extraordinary. Truly. My name is Carlos Martinez." Catherine's heart gave a single, hard thump. It was Sophia's father, the linchpin of Ethan's entire plan. He didn't seem to notice her shock. "My firm," he continued, his voice laced with icy fury, "was scheduled to hear a pitch this afternoon for a project that I must now assume was a fraudulent imitation of yours, from a Mr. Ethan Cole." He glanced back toward Ethan's row. The seats were now empty. "I believe we have a great deal to discuss," Mr. Martinez said, turning his piercing gaze back to her. "My company does not do business with thieves." As Catherine shook his offered hand, a triumphant Adrian appeared at her side, his grin wider than the wingspan of a 747 over Mr. Martinez's shoulder through the grand ballroom doors. She saw the final pathetic scene of her old life play out. In the sunlit hotel lobby, Sophia was screaming at Ethan, her gestures sharp and furious. His hands were raised in a desperate pleading gesture. Then, with a final shouted word, she slapped him hard across the face. She turned on her heel and stormed away without a backward glance, leaving Ethan standing alone, a solitary statue of utter ruin. He had gambled everything on a lie, and in the space of 20 glorious minutes, he had lost it all. Checkmate. The downfall of Ethan Cole was not a slow decline. It was a catastrophic implosion happening in the sterile, marble-floored lobby of the Mandarin Oriental. After Sophia's slap, the sound of which echoed like a gunshot in the suddenly silent space. He stood, frozen, the stinging imprint of her hand on his cheek, a brand of his public humiliation. The whispers started immediately. Glances that were once admiring were now filled with contempt and morbid curiosity. He was no longer a charismatic futurist. He was a spectacle. He turned to flee to escape the crushing judgment in the air, but his path was blocked by two men in impeccably tailored suits. They moved with a quiet, legal finality. "Mr. Ethan Cole," the taller of the two asked, his tone devoid of any emotion. Ethan could only nod, his throat suddenly dry. The man extended a thick manila envelope. "You've been served." Inside the lobby's opulent lounge, with its plush seating and soaring ceilings, Ethan tore open the envelope. The legalese was dense, but the words were clear enough to be hammer blows. A petition for divorce citing felony fraud. A civil lawsuit for the immediate recovery of $350,000 in stolen and misappropriated funds. A cease and desist order, barring him from even mentioning the name Ethelgard. It was a comprehensive, systematic dismantling of his entire scheme, executed with breathtaking speed and precision. A desperate, primal need for flight kicked in. He pulled out his phone, his hands trembling, and tried to access the Spanish bank account where his new life was stored. Access denied. Account frozen by court order. He tried another. The same message. Gavin's digital net cast from London had tightened. The money, his golden parachute, was gone, locked away behind an impenetrable wall of international law. Stripped of his project, his wealthy connection, and every last illicit cent, Ethan was marooned. The life of luxury he had tasted for a mere 48 hours had evaporated, leaving only the bitter residue of failure and a mountain of debt that would shadow him for years. The last Catherine would hear of him, relayed months later through her lawyer, was that he had crawled back to the United States, been forced into a humiliating bankruptcy, and was living in his parents' basement in Ohio, a disgraced pariah awaiting trial. He had flown across an ocean to reinvent himself, only to crash so completely that he would never recover from the wreckage. For Catherine, however, the aftermath of the symposium was an equally swift but opposite trajectory. Her ascent was meteoric. The meeting with Carlos Martinez took place not in a stuffy boardroom, but in his private penthouse office, a glass-encased space with a panoramic view of the very city she was now poised to reshape. Carlos was a shrewd businessman, his politeness masking a razor-sharp intellect. He had seen the surface of her brilliance. Now he wanted to inspect its foundation. For 2 hours he grilled her not with hostility, but with the intense curiosity of a master craftsman examining the work of a potential protégé. "Your modular construction," he began. "The cost per unit seems almost too optimistic. Explain the supply chain you envision for the recycled composites." Catherine didn't hesitate. She walked him through the materials, science, the potential European suppliers she had already researched, and the economic models that made it viable. Ethan would have sputtered platitudes. Catherine provided data. "And the social aspect," Carlos pressed, leaning forward. "A central courtyard, shared amenities. In a luxury market, people pay for privacy. How do you sell community? Because we've forgotten what true luxury is," Catherine countered, her voice resonating with the passion of her conviction. "It isn't isolation, it's connection. It's the security of knowing your neighbors, the convenience of on-site childcare, the simple joy of a shared garden." The Ethelgard project isn't just selling apartments, it's selling a better way to live. She laid out her soul's work, the years of thought and passion that Ethan could never have faked. At the end of it, Carlos Martinez leaned back in his chair, a slow, deeply impressed smile spreading across his face. He made her an offer that took her breath away. He wouldn't just buy her project. He wanted to be the primary investor in her new firm, Ethelgard Designs. And he wanted to commission its first implementation, not as a single building, but as the architectural centerpiece of a new waterfront development in Valencia. She hadn't just gotten her project back, she was being given a whole city block to bring it to life. A week later, the whirlwind had settled into a vibrant new reality. Catherine sat with Adrian at a small cafe, tucked away in the labyrinthine streets of the Gothic Quarter, the very neighborhood she and Ethan had once pinned to a map. The afternoon sun filtered through the narrow alleyways, dappling their table in warm light. A new moleskin sketchbook lay open in front of her, filled with the first nascent scribbles of the Valencia project. She felt lighter, freer than she had in a decade. A profound sense of peace had settled where the anxiety and grief once resided. She had lost a husband, but in the process she had found herself. "It feels strange," she confessed, stirring her cortado. "Sitting here. This was supposed to be our place. I thought it would feel haunted." "Is it?" Adrian asked, his gaze gentle. "No," she said, a slow smile spreading across her face. "It's just a place. A beautiful place. The ghosts are gone." She looked at her cousin, her gratitude immense. "So what's next for Captain Pierce, International Man of Mystery and Revenge?" He chuckled, a warm, deep sound. "Back to the day job. I'm flying a 777 to Hong Kong in a few hours. A bit less dramatic than corporate espionage." "I can't thank you enough, Adrian," Catherine said, her voice thick with emotion. "You didn't just save me from him. You helped me save myself. You gave me the tools and the push I needed." "That's what family is for," he said, simply, reaching across the table to give her hand a squeeze. "Besides, it was the most fun I've had on a layover in years. Watching that snake's face when you took the stage. Better than any in-flight movie." He looked at his watch. "Time to go. But I've already put in my bid for the Valencia route. I'll be back to see the groundbreaking." "It's a date," she promised. After he left, Catherine remained at the table, reluctant to let the perfect moment end. She watched the city move around her, the locals chattering in Catalan, the tourists gazing up at the ancient architecture, the scent of espresso and baked bread hanging in the air. The betrayal at JFK felt like a chapter from a different book, a story that had happened to someone else. The pain had been real, the humiliation scarring, but from those ashes she had forged something stronger and more beautiful. Ethan had tried to ground her, to steal her wings, and her sky, believing she was nothing without him. But he had made one critical, arrogant miscalculation. He had forgotten about the fierce, protective love of her family, embodied by a grounded angel in a pilot's uniform, who knew exactly how to navigate a storm and create turbulence when needed. In his attempt to push her from the plane, he hadn't set her up for a fall. He had simply forced her to realize she never needed the plane in the first place. Catherine Bishop picked up her pen, and as she looked up at the brilliant, cloudless Spanish sky, she began to draw. She was born to soar. That is the incredible story of Catherine Bishop, a woman whose world was shattered on the cold floor of an airport terminal, only for her to rebuild it into an empire in the heart of Barcelona. It's a powerful reminder that sometimes the most devastating betrayals can become the catalyst for our greatest triumphs. Catherine's journey wasn't just about getting revenge. It was about reclaiming her identity, her talent, and her future from a man who tried to steal it all. It's a story of resilience, the unbreakable bond of family, and the sweet, sweet justice of watching a carefully laid trap snap shut on the person who wronged you. What did you think of Ethan's ultimate downfall? Was it everything you hoped for? Let us know in the comments below. If you enjoyed watching a villain get his perfect comeuppance, please hit that like button. If you believe that everyone deserves a second chance to build their dream, no matter the setback, share this story with someone who needs to hear it. And most importantly, subscribe to our channel for more unforgettable stories of justice and empowerment. Thank you for listening. Tonight we're not in Hollywood, we're in Napa Valley, where the drama is as rich and full-bodied as the local Cabernet. We're at the lavish engagement party of tech billionaire Jude Halstead. He's about to raise a toast to his stunning new fiancée, Ivy, in front of the world's elite. He thinks he's on top of the world, standing in the vineyard where he plans to build his future. But what he doesn't know is that the ground he's standing on has already shifted beneath him. In a move of breathtaking audacity, his ex-wife, the woman he thought he'd left in his past, has just signed the deed to the entire estate. He's about to thank his new love, not as a host, but as a tenant. And she's here to watch. The evening of June 12th was draped in the kind of flawless California twilight that felt personally commissioned by God, or at the very least by someone with an obscene amount of money. At Serenity Hills Vineyard, a sprawling jewel in Napa Valley's crown fairy lights, dripped from ancient oak trees like captured stars. The air thick with the scent of lavender, night-blooming jasmine, and damp, fertile earth carried the murmur of expensive chatter and the clinking of Baccarat champagne flutes. This was not merely a party, it was a declaration. Jude Halstead, at 46, stood at the center of it all, a king surveying his newly conquered territory. His suit was Tom Ford, tailored so precisely it seemed to have been stitched onto his athletic frame. His smile was a weapon of mass charisma, honed over years of boardroom negotiations and venture capital pitches that had turned his software company, Nexus Dynamics, into a global titan. He was the quintessential new money billionaire, audacious, restless, and utterly convinced of his own manifest destiny. Clinging to his arm, looking up at him with adoring, doe-like eyes, was Ivy Fairchild. At 25, she was perfection sculpted from porcelain and starlight, her dress a shimmering silver creation by a designer whose name was whispered in reverent tones, clung to her figure like a second skin. On her left hand, a diamond the size of a quail's egg greedily drank the light, a gaudy testament to Jude's wealth and her victory. She was an influencer, a socialite, a beautiful canvas onto which Jude could paint the next, more glamorous chapter of his life. To the assembled guests, a glittering menagerie of tech moguls, San Francisco socialites and East Coast financiers, they were the perfect couple. A powerful self-made man trading up for a younger, more dazzling model. It was a story as old as time, and in their world, it was a story of success. Jude surveyed the crowd, his chest swelling with a pride so potent it was almost intoxicating. He saw his COO, David Chen, laughing with a senator. He saw venture capitalists who had once scoffed at his ideas, now sipping his vintage champagne. And in a quiet corner, he saw Ivy's mother. Marcella Fairchild, her eyes sharp and calculating, watching her daughter's performance with the intensity of a hawk. Marcella was a woman from a family that had lost its old money fortune generations ago, and she had spent her life clawing to get back within sniffing distance of it. In Jude, she saw not a son-in-law, but a winning lottery ticket. "Isn't it perfect, my love?" Ivy murmured, her voice a breathy whisper, designed for his ears alone. "Everything is just perfect." "It's a perfect start," Jude corrected her, squeezing her hand. "This place, it's going to be our home. We'll build a house on that ridge overlooking the vines, a place for our children." The words hung in the air, a future he was actively willing into existence. But for a fleeting, unwelcome moment, the ghost of another future, another woman, flickered in his mind. Esme. His ex-wife. Esme Hollings. The name felt like a foreign word in his mouth, now something from a dusty, forgotten textbook. Their divorce had been finalized 14 months ago, a process he'd considered a resounding success. Esme, the quiet, intellectual woman from a staid, old-money Philadelphia family, had been his partner for 15 years. Her family's seed money, a modest $250,000, he now considered pocket change, had been the catalyst for his first company. Her connections had opened doors. Her steady, unassuming presence had been the bedrock upon which he built his empire. But bedrock is not exciting. It's not thrilling. Over time, her quiet strength felt like judgment. Her preference for substantive conversation over glittering parties felt like a limitation. He had started to see her as a relic of his past, a black-and-white photograph in his new Technicolor life. The divorce had been brutal, but conducted with a chilling civility in the public eye. His lawyers, a pack of corporate sharks, had descended upon her. They'd painted her as an out-of-touch woman who hadn't contributed to the company's real growth in years. They had leveraged a draconian non-disclosure agreement he'd made her sign a decade prior, effectively gagging her from speaking about their life or the business. In the end, Esme had surprised everyone. She didn't fight for the half of the fortune she was likely entitled to. She and her lawyer, a shrewd, silver-haired family friend named Arthur Sterling, from the prestigious firm Hollings and Sterling, had negotiated a settlement that on paper looked like a fraction of what she could have claimed. Jude had seen it as a surrender, a quiet admission that she couldn't handle the fight. He'd taken her acceptance of the deal as proof of her weakness, of her obsolescence. He'd signed the papers, transferred the funds, and promptly scrubbed her from his narrative, replacing her with the bright, shiny promise of Ivy. He had met Ivy at a charity gala in Monaco 6 months after the separation. She was a breath of fresh air, all vibrant energy and flattering admiration. She didn't challenge his opinions. She amplified them. She didn't want to discuss geopolitical trends. She wanted to post selfies on a yacht. She was easy. She was beautiful. She was the perfect accessory for the man he wanted to be. Now standing in Serenity Hills vineyard, Jude felt the final satisfying click of his new life locking into place. This vineyard had been a particular sticking point in the divorce. It had been their place, his and Esme's. He had proposed to her on the very knoll where a string quartet was now playing Vivaldi. They had spent weekends here dreaming of a quiet future of growing old together amongst the gnarled vines. During the asset division, his lawyers had argued it was a corporate asset, and he had managed to keep it under his control. It felt like the ultimate victory, rewriting his history with Esme, by making this sacred ground the launch pad for his future with Ivy. He had even instructed his team to rush the purchase from the corporate holding entity into his personal name, a deal he believed was finalizing this very week, just in time for the party. The vineyard manager, a weathered man named Liam, who had worked the land for 30 years, approached him discreetly. Liam's face was a road map of worry lines, and he held a tablet in his hand. "Mr. Halstead, apologies for the interruption. A magnificent party." "Thank you, Liam." "It is, isn't it?" Jude beamed. "Everything to your satisfaction." Liam hesitated, a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. "Sir, mostly. It's just, I've been trying to get a final sign-off on the pyrotechnics permit for the midnight fireworks display. The county regulations are very strict. The clearance needs to be authorized by the legal property owner." Jude waved a dismissive hand. "You're looking at him. I own this place. Just put my name on it." "Well, that's the thing, sir," Liam said, his voice dropping lower. "I submitted it with your name this afternoon, as instructed, but it was rejected about an hour ago. The county clerk sent it back. They said the ownership transfer on record was finalized yesterday afternoon, and the signatory needs to be the new legal owner. The name on the deed isn't, well, it isn't Jude Halstead." Jude's smile faltered. A cold knot of confusion tightened in his stomach. "What? That's impossible. My legal team assured me it was done. There must be a clerical error. Who do they have listed?" Liam swallowed hard, his gaze shifting uncomfortably towards the grand vineyard house on the hill, its windows glowing warmly in the twilight. He looked back at Jude, his expression a mixture of pity and professional duty. The deed was filed yesterday at 4:52 p.m. with the Napa County Recorder's Office. The vineyard, the winery, the residence, all 300 acres. It was a cash purchase, no mortgage. Liam took a deep breath. "According to the official record, sir, the sole proprietor of Serenity Hills Vineyard is a holding company. Hollings Sterling Enterprises." He paused, letting the name sink in. "The signatory and sole director of that company is listed as Esme Hollings." The world, which had been spinning in a perfect glittering orbit around Jude Halstead, came to a sudden screeching halt. The music seemed to fade. The laughter of his guests turned into a dull, mocking roar. He looked from Liam's grim face to the triumphant diamond on Ivy's hand, and then his eyes, wide with disbelief and dawning horror, were drawn inexorably toward the main house on the hill. The French doors to the veranda were open. A silhouette stood there motionless, looking down upon the party. It was the figure of a woman, poised and elegant. He couldn't see her face, but he didn't need to. He knew the posture. He knew the quiet, unshakable stillness. It was Esme. And just as this catastrophic realization hit him, the band leader, a man he'd paid an exorbitant amount of money to fly in from New York, stepped up to his microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, a round of applause for our gracious hosts. And now it is my great pleasure to invite the man of the hour, Mr. Jude Halstead, to the stage to say a few words. A spotlight found Jude, pinning him in its white glare. A wave of applause washed over him. Ivy squeezed his arm, whispering, "Darling, that's you. Go on." He was trapped in the blinding light on land he didn't own, at a party that was now a monumental testament to his own humiliation. He felt 100 pairs of eyes on him, and from the house on the hill, he felt one pair. He had the microphone, he had the stage, he had an audience, and he had absolutely no idea that the real story of the night was just beginning. His carefully constructed world was not just shaking, it was about to be systematically dismantled vine by vine. Time seemed to warp and stretch. The short walk from his table to the small, elegantly decorated stage felt like a trek across a frozen desert. Every smiling face he passed seemed to be hiding a smirk. Every congratulatory nod felt like a jab of mockery. Did they know? Could they possibly know? His mind raced a frantic scramble for a logical explanation. A mistake. A legal maneuver by Esme to spite him, something his lawyers would crush in the morning. It had to be. He reached the microphone, the metal cool and solid beneath his trembling hand. He looked out at the sea of faces, shimmering in the twilight. He saw David Chen, his brow furrowed with concern. He saw Marcella Fairchild, her painted smile tight with confusion. And he saw Ivy, her expression a perfect portrait of beaming pride, utterly oblivious. Her ignorance was almost as infuriating as Esme's audacity. He had a choice. He could create a scene, call a halt to the proceedings, demand answers. That would be an admission of defeat, a public unraveling. Or he could do what he had always done. Project unassailable confidence. He would play the part, deliver the speech, and deal with the firestorm in private. Control the narrative. That was his mantra. He cleared his throat. The sound was amplified across the manicured lawns, momentarily silencing the chatter. "Thank you," he began, his voice smoother than he felt. "Thank you all for being here tonight. To see all of you, our dearest friends, family and partners gathered in this truly magical place means the world to us." He paused, forcing a warm smile. He could feel the eyes from the house on the hill burning into his back. He refused to look. "I've always believed that life is about evolution, about moving forward, about shedding the past to embrace a brighter, more vibrant future." The words were a clear, intentional dig at Esme, a line he had rehearsed with a smug sense of satisfaction. Now they tasted like ash in his mouth. "And my future," he said, turning to beam at Ivy, who placed a hand over her heart, "is standing right there." The crowd awed on cue. Ivy's eyes glistened with perfectly timed tears. "Ivy," Jude continued, his voice swelling with practiced emotion, "you came into my life like a sunrise after a long, grey winter. You brought color. You brought passion. You brought life. You've shown me what it means to truly live, not just exist." Every word was a performance, a desperate, frantic lie designed to paper over the gaping sinkhole that had just opened beneath his feet. He was praising the sunrise while standing in a building that belonged to the winter. "And so we wanted to celebrate our beginning here." He gestured around the vineyard, the movement feeling stiff and unnatural. "In this place, Serenity Hills, because it represents a new foundation, a place where we will build our home, our family, and our future. It's the end of one chapter and the glorious beginning of another." He raised his glass. So please join me in a toast to Ivy. My love, my future, my everything. And to new beginnings. To Ivy. To new beginnings, the crowd echoed, glasses held high. As they drank, a wave of relief washed over Jude. He'd done it. He had navigated the minefield. Now he could get off this stage and unleash hell on his legal team and then on Esme. But as he turned to step down, he saw Liam, the vineyard manager, in a hushed but urgent conversation with David Chen. David's face was pale. David caught his eye and gave an almost imperceptible shake of his head, a clear warning. It was too late. The damage was not contained. The first ripple of chaos began not with a shout, but with a whisper. A well-known gossip columnist, a woman named Beatrice Finch, who had a nose for scandal, was seen speaking animatedly into her phone. A moment later, phones began to light up across the lawn like fireflies. The low murmur of the party began to change in tone, shifting from polite chatter to excited, urgent buzzing. Ivy, finally sensing the shift in atmosphere, glided to Jude's side. "Darling, what's happening?" "People are staring." Before he could answer, Marcella Fairchild appeared, her face a mask of barely controlled panic. "Jude, my phone is blowing up. A news alert just came through from the Financial Times. Something about a major real estate transaction in Napa. It mentions your ex-wife." And then the ghost at the feast chose to make her entrance. Esme Hollings did not storm in. She did not shout. She descended the stone steps from the main house with the unhurried grace of a queen taking a stroll through her own garden. She wore a simple, impeccably tailored navy blue dress that spoke of quiet confidence, not ostentatious wealth. Her dark hair was pulled back in an elegant chignon, and her only jewelry was a pair of pearl earrings and a watch with a worn leather strap. She wasn't dressed for a party. She was dressed for business. She was followed by her lawyer, Arthur Sterling, who carried a slim leather portfolio. They didn't head for Jude. Instead, they walked directly to the bar, where Esme requested a glass of water from a stunned bartender. She took a sip, her eyes calmly sweeping over the scene. She wasn't a crasher. She was an owner, making her presence known. The effect was immediate and devastating. The party fractured. Conversations died mid-sentence. All eyes swiveled from Jude and Ivy to the woman standing serenely by the bar. The narrative Jude had fought so desperately to control had been hijacked in a single, silent act of defiance. Jude felt a surge of white-hot rage that eclipsed his fear. This was a public execution. Leaving Ivy and her mother standing frozen, he strode across the lawn toward Esme, his footsteps crunching on the gravel path. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" he hissed, his voice low and venomous. Esme turned to face him. Up close, he saw that she was not the timid, worn-down woman he remembered from the divorce proceedings. There were new lines of confidence around her eyes. The haunted look was gone, replaced by a steely resolve. "Jude," she said, her voice even and calm. "I'm admiring the party. You've spared no expense, though I'm afraid the fireworks might be an issue." The permit wasn't approved. The casual, factual nature of her statement was more infuriating than any insult. "I will ruin you for this, Esme. This pathetic, vengeful stunt, my lawyers will tear you apart." "Your lawyers," Arthur Sterling interjected, stepping forward slightly. His tone was mild, but his eyes were like chips of ice. "Jude, I'd be more concerned with what your lawyers have failed to do. For instance, they failed to perform a final title check before advising you to host a major event on a property you do not own. That seems like a rather significant oversight. This is a game. You've manipulated something. Jude spat. Not at all, Esme said, taking another sip of water. It was a straightforward transaction. The previous owners were eager to sell. I simply made them an offer they couldn't refuse. All cash, a quick close. It's what you taught me, isn't it? Be decisive. Go after what you want. Her words struck him like a physical blow. She was using his own philosophy against him. From across the lawn, he could see Ivy watching them, her beautiful face a canvas of confusion and dawning fear. Her mother was whispering furiously in her ear. This was not part of their plan. The perfect dream was cracking at the seams. Jude lowered his voice further, trying to contain the explosion he felt building inside him. Why, Esme? Why this, after all this time? Was the settlement not enough? You want to embarrass me? Esme finally allowed a flicker of genuine emotion to cross her face. It wasn't anger. It was something closer to pity. Embarrass you, she said softly. Oh, Jude, you still think this is about you? She gestured with her free hand to the vines, the rolling hills, the old stone winery. This was supposed to be our dream. Not mine, not yours. Ours. The one you traded for. That. She gave a subtle, almost imperceptible nod towards Ivy. You didn't just discard me, Jude. You discarded this, our history. You tried to erase it, to pave over it with something new and shiny. You thought you could take a place that was sacred to us and turn it into a stage for your new life. She took a step closer, her voice dropping to a near whisper that was for him alone. I didn't buy this place to ruin your party. I bought it because it's mine. I bought it to reclaim a piece of my life that you tried to steal. Your party is just a fortunate coincidence. Consider it the housewarming. With that, she turned her back on him and said to Arthur loud enough for those nearby to hear. Arthur, perhaps we should check on the catering staff. I want to make sure they're aware of the change in management for their final invoicing. It was a masterstroke of power, delivered not with a shout, but with the quiet, devastating authority of an owner taking charge of her property. Jude was left standing alone, the host of a party, who had just been reduced to an uninvited guest. The King of Serenity Hills was now nothing more than a trespasser, and his carefully built empire was about to face a reckoning it was utterly unprepared for. The unraveling was not a single event, but a rapid and brutal succession of waves, each one tearing away another layer of Jude Halstead's meticulously constructed reality. It began with the social fabric of the evening, then tore through the personal, and finally crashed into the bedrock of his legal and financial existence, leaving nothing but ruin in its wake. Wave 1. The social implosion. The moment Esme turned her back on Jude, a palpable shift occurred in the atmosphere. It was as if a soundproof barrier had shattered. The polite ambient murmur of the party ceased, replaced by a charged silence that was quickly filled by a new, more urgent sound, the electric buzz of scandal. Across the manicured lawn, champagne glasses paused halfway to lips. Heads that had been politely inclined in conversation now swiveled as one, their focus lasering in on the drama unfolding near the main house. The air, once thick with jasmine and expensive perfume, now crackled with speculation. Ivy felt the change first as a cold dread that seeped through her shimmering silver dress. The adoring gazes that had followed her all evening had curdled into something else, something hungry and predatory. She was no longer the fairy tale princess. She was now one half of a developing catastrophe, and she could feel the narrative slipping from her grasp. Her mother Marcella felt it too, but her reaction was not fear. It was fury. This was a direct assault on her life's masterpiece. She grabbed her daughter's arm, her perfectly manicured nails digging into Ivy's skin like talons. "Do not just stand there gawking," Marcella hissed, her voice a low, venomous command. Her smile remained plastered on her face, a grotesque mask of festivity. Shoulders back, chin up. You are a Halstead now. You will stand by your man. Project unity, Ivy. Project strength. We do not lose control. Ivy jolted by the pain, and the command tried to comply. She attempted to rearrange her features into a look of concerned, supportive love, but her face felt like a stranger's, the muscles refusing to obey. Her influencer's instinct to manage the image was at war with the raw, primal terror of a young woman watching her entire future catch fire. She took a hesitant step toward Jude, a marionette with tangled strings, but Jude was oblivious to her. His universe had contracted to a single point of focus, Esme. The public humiliation was a lit fuse, rocketing toward the powder keg of his ego. He saw the whispers, felt the stares of his peers, the VCs, the rivals, the sycophants, and interpreted them as judgments on his power. This was not just an interruption. It was a coup. He moved toward Esme, his stride long and furious. Each step across the lawn was a walk through a gauntlet of his own, making every face a mirror, reflecting his own sudden impotence. He caught up to her, just as she reached the first of the stone steps, leading to the veranda, grabbing her arm to halt her ascent. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" He snarled, the words tearing from his throat, raw and unrestrained. Esme stopped. She didn't flinch or pull away. Instead, she slowly looked down at his white-knuckled hand on her arm, then raised her eyes to meet his. Her gaze was not fiery. It was profoundly, disappointingly calm. "Let go of me, Jude." Her composure was gasoline on his fire. "You did this to destroy me." He accused, his voice rising, drawing the attention of the nearest clusters of guests, who now shamelessly edged closer. "No, Jude," she replied, her voice steady and clear, carrying easily in the sudden quiet. "You are doing a fine job of that, all by yourself. You with your pathological need for an audience. You with your hubris. Did you really believe that the 15 years we spent building a life together meant so little that I would simply vanish? That I would let you desecrate our most sacred memories without a single word?" "Memories?" he scoffed, a cruel, dismissive laugh escaping his lips. "I built an empire." "You were there." "Yes, but I did the work. I took the risks. We had a business arrangement that had run its course. It's over. You lost. This is pathetic." He had finally said it. The lie he had told himself for years now weaponized and thrown at her feet. It was the moment the ice in Esme's veins didn't just crack. It sublimated into a vapor of pure, focused rage. Her back straightened, and though her voice remained level, it acquired a chilling, resonant power that seemed to vibrate in the air. "A business arrangement." She repeated the words, precise and dripping with contempt. "I see. So my family's inheritance, the $250,000 that you begged my father for because no bank would give you a loan, that was just a transactional fee. My connections. The introductions to the investors my family had cultivated for 3 generations. That was just networking. The hundreds of nights I spent editing your business plans and coaching you through presentations while you threw tantrums of self-doubt. The dinners I hosted the egos. I soothed the entire career in art curation that I placed on hold so you could pursue your dream. That was all just part of the administrative support for our business arrangement. She took a single step closer, invading his space, forcing him to hold her gaze. The crowd was utterly silent, hanging on every word. I built the launch pad for you, Jude. I built it with my money, my family's name, and my life's energy. And when you finally got to the moon, you decided the woman who assembled the rocket with her bare hands was too much dead weight to keep on board. So don't you dare stand here on this land we chose together and call what we had a business arrangement. Wave 2. The second twist. As Jude stood reeling, his face pale with shock and fury, the second wave began to form. Marcella Fairchild, seeing her daughter frozen and her future son-in-law being verbally dismantled, decided on a direct intervention. In her world, problems were solved by asserting dominance. She would put this bitter, nostalgic ex-wife in her place. She strode forward, a galleon in full sail, her expression one of righteous maternal fury. She positioned herself between Jude and Esme, a new combatant entering the ring. Mrs. Hollings, Marcella began, her voice slick with condescending pity. I think you've made your point. I don't know what kind of bitter, pathetic game you're playing, but it's time to stop. Jude and my daughter are in love. They are building a future. The most graceful thing you could do is accept that and move on instead of orchestrating this theatrical, desperate nonsense. Esme's gaze shifted from Jude's stunned face to Marcella's. The fire in her eyes cooled, replaced by something far more dangerous, a look of placid, almost clinical recognition. She tilted her head slightly, as if examining a curious specimen under a microscope. Mrs. Fairchild, Esme, said, her tone suddenly soft, conversational. Marcella, isn't it? We've never had the pleasure of a formal introduction, but I feel as though I know you, or at least I know of your family's history. A flicker of uncertainty crossed Marcella's face. I have no idea what you could possibly be talking about. Oh, I think you do. Esme continued, her voice a silken thread of menace. I spent 8 years chairing the acquisitions committee for the Sterling Hollings Foundation. We oversaw hundreds of applications. I have a rather good memory for details. I remember one in particular from about a decade ago. A request for a heritage commerce grant, a fund designed to help historically significant local businesses. The application was from a family whose third-generation textile business in the garment district had declared Chapter 11 bankruptcy. They were pleading for a bridge loan, citing distant historical ties to my grandmother's family. Esme paused, letting the silence hang for a beat. The Fairchild family. The blood drained from Marcella's face. Her expertly applied makeup suddenly looked like a fragile mask on a skull. Her mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. This was a ghost from a past she had spent 20 years trying to outrun and bury. But Esme wasn't finished. She let her gaze drift past the horrified Marcella to Ivy, who was now standing ghost-white and trembling beside Jude. And my memory is quite clear on another matter as well. Esme said, her voice still deceptively gentle. A few years after that, we were reviewing the HR files from one of our portfolio companies, a boutique marketing firm called Argent Strategies. We had to handle a rather delicate termination. A summer intern, a very bright and ambitious young woman, had been caught using her manager's login credentials to access confidential client acquisition strategies. It was a serious ethical breach. She was summarily dismissed, of course, with a note in her file that made her essentially unemployable in that field. Esme's eyes locked onto Ivy's. Her name was Ivy Fairchild. A collective sharp intake of breath rippled through the nearest guests. Ivy let out a small, choked sound, as if she had been physically struck. This was her deepest shame, the secret that had derailed her ambitions and forced her into the superficial world of influencing a career built on image precisely because her real-world credentials had been torched. Jude spun to look at Ivy, his face a maelstrom of confusion, disgust, and dawning comprehension. The doe-eyed innocent, the breath of fresh air. It was all an act, a lie. He hadn't found her. He had been targeted. He wasn't her savior. He was her mark. The entire relationship, every whispered, "I love you." Every adoring glance was recast in the sickening light of a calculated, desperate con. He had been played for the biggest fool in Silicon Valley. Esme delivered the final quiet incision, her attention still on Ivy. "You didn't just want his money, did you, Ivy? You wanted his name." The name Halstead was a disinfectant, powerful enough to bleach the stain of Fairchild, to make the world forget you weren't just a beautiful socialite, but a failed intern fired for corporate espionage. Wave 3. The legal Leviathan. Just as the emotional carnage reached its zenith, just as Jude felt the ground give way to an abyss of personal betrayal, the third and final wave struck. Arthur Sterling, who had been observing the proceedings with the patient stillness of a predator, chose this precise moment to step forward. The quiet authority in his movement commanded immediate attention. He opened the slim leather portfolio he carried, its click sounding unnaturally loud in the profound silence. "Jude Arthur," said his tone calm, professional, and utterly devoid of emotion. It was the voice of a man about to read an obituary. "While we are all gathered, there are a few outstanding legal matters we should probably address." "Get off my—" Jude started, then faltered, the words dying in his throat. He couldn't even finish the sentence. It wasn't his property. In a moment, Arthur said smoothly, as if granting a small indulgence. He pulled a document from the portfolio. "First, let's discuss the non-disclosure agreement, the one your legal team so aggressively drafted and insisted Esme sign upon your separation." He held up the paper. "It contains a rather comprehensive mutual non-disparagement clause. I'm sure you recall it. It explicitly prohibits either party from making public statements that could be reasonably construed as disparaging the other's character, personal life, or professional acumen." Arthur looked up from the page, his gaze pinning Jude in place. "Tonight, Jude on a stage with a microphone, in front of a significant assembly of your personal and professional peers, you delivered a speech in which you referred to your 15-year marriage to my client as a long grey winter, and spoke of the need to shed the past. My associates, we have 3 independent stenographers in the audience tonight, have a full verbatim transcript. Our legal opinion, Jude, is that your speech constitutes a flagrant and material breach of the very agreement you weaponized to ensure Esme's silence." A cold sweat broke out on Jude's forehead. That's absurd." "Is it?" Arthur countered, his voice like chipping ice. "The penalty clause for said breach, drafted, I might add, by your own lead counsel, is quite specific. It stipulates 2 things. First, the complete and immediate nullification of all confidentiality provisions within the NDA for both parties. And second, a liquidated damages penalty of $50 million. The number hung in the air, an impossible, suffocating weight. $50 million. But Arthur's hand was already reaching back into the portfolio. Second, he continued pulling out a thicker file. Esme's purchase of this estate was, as you can imagine, a significant transaction. It triggered a full-scale, and I must say long overdue, forensic accounting review of all assets related to the divorce settlement. My team, while conducting their due diligence, uncovered certain irregularities. He slid a single sheet of paper from the file. It was a complex flowchart, a dizzying map of lines and boxes connecting shell corporations and offshore accounts. He held it up for Jude to see. It appears Jude Arthur stated his voice a flat line of accusation that in the fiscal year preceding your divorce, you systematically devalued key marital assets, specifically your undeclared equity in several offshore tech incubators, your holdings in Ethelred Cayman Partners, and the Odyssey Growth Fund, to name just two. You funneled capital through this labyrinth of shell companies, a process you clearly believed was untraceable, effectively hiding what we conservatively estimate to be $200 million in marital assets from both Esme and the court. David Chen, who had crept closer, let out a choked gasp. This wasn't a messy divorce anymore. This was wire fraud. This was conspiracy. This was criminal. You committed perjury in your financial disclosures. Jude Arthur concluded, his eyes as hard and unforgiving as granite. That is a felony. And now that Esme is no longer bound by the NDA, which you so conveniently breached for us tonight, she is free to bring this information to the attention of the appropriate authorities. He paused, letting the final blow gather its full devastating weight before delivering it, which on her instruction I did an hour ago. The Securities and Exchange Commission, the Internal Revenue Service, and the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Northern District of California have all been sent a copy of this file. Checkmate. A profound, tomb-like silence descended upon the party. The chirping of crickets in the surrounding vineyards sounded like a screaming siren. Jude Halstead stood utterly exposed. His fiancée a fraud, his party a sham, his home the property of his ex-wife, his reputation incinerated, and his entire fortune and freedom now subject to the cold machinery of federal prosecution. Ivy, her face a mask of pure horror, finally broke. The dream had become a nightmare from which there was no waking up. With a strangled sob, she turned and fled into the darkness, a silver ghost disappearing into the trees. Marcella, her face aged a decade, in 10 minutes scurried after her 2 rats, deserting a ship that had already sunk to the bottom of the sea. Jude was left alone in the spotlight's glare, a king with no crown, no castle, no queen, and no future. The rage had evaporated, replaced by the cold, hollow, crushing emptiness of total and absolute defeat. He was surrounded by the wreckage of a life he had built on lies, brought down by the one truth he had tried and failed to erase. The end of the party was not an event. It was a detonation followed by a vacuum. The moment Esme and Arthur ascended the stone steps and disappeared into the main house, the fragile illusion of celebration shattered completely. The string quartet's music had long since died, leaving an unnatural quiet punctuated by the frantic whispers of guests and the crunch of gravel under the tires of hastily summoned cars. A collective panicked exodus was underway. It was the social equivalent of a shipwreck, with everyone scrambling for the lifeboats, eager to distance themselves from the wreckage of Jude Halstead's life. Jude remained frozen on the lawn, a statue at the center of his own disaster. The fairy lights, which hours ago had seemed so magical, now flickered with a cold, mocking indifference, illuminating a scene of opulent carnage, half-eaten plates of lobster, abandoned glasses of champagne, growing warm and flat, a silk scarf snagged on a rose bush. His phone, a relentless brick of vibration against his leg, was a physical manifestation of the chaos he had unleashed. His COO, David Chen, calling with frantic urgency. His lawyers a chorus of confused rage. His PR team attempting to staunch a wound that was already fatal. He answered none of them. His gaze was fixed on the house on the hill, where a single warm light burned in an upstairs window. Esme's window. It was a beacon of calm, unassailable power, and it made the inferno of his life below feel all the more pathetic. The final indignity came not as a shout, but as a quiet professional request. A security guard, a man named Frank, whom Jude vaguely recognized, a man whose children's names Jude had never bothered to learn, approached him. His posture was apologetic, but his eyes were firm. Mr. Halstead Frank said, his voice studiously neutral, avoiding any hint of pity or malice. "I'm sorry, sir, but the new owner has requested we secure the property for the night. I can have one of my men drive you to the gate." The words hung in the cold night air. The new owner. Secure the property. He was being removed. Not just defeated, but evicted from the scene of his own coronation. He gave a single jerky nod, unable to form a reply. As he was led away, a trespasser on the land he thought he owned, he didn't look back. There was nothing left to see. In the days and weeks that followed, the private humiliation at the vineyard metastasized into a public immolation. Jude's world, once a glittering solar system, with him as the sun collapsed into a black hole of legal and financial ruin. His life became a sterile montage of depositions and emergency board meetings, held not in his own palatial corner office overlooking the San Francisco Bay, but in the stuffy, wood-paneled conference rooms of his lawyers. The smell of his old life of expensive cologne, rare orchids, and limitless power was replaced by the scent of old paper stale coffee and fear. He watched helpless as the stock ticker for Nexus Dynamics, NXDS, bled red on every financial network. He took a call from David Chen, not as a friend, but as a functionary of the board. David's voice was strained, stripped of all its old camaraderie. He informed Jude that he was being placed on an indefinite and immediate leave of absence, pending the results of the SEC investigation. Jude had been deposed not by an enemy, but by the very system he had mastered. He retreated to a soulless glass penthouse he still owned for now, a gilded cage, where he paced like a captive animal. It was there, amidst the sterile, white furniture and panoramic views of a city that no longer felt like his, that he received the final concise epitaph for his failed romance. A single text message from Ivy delivered with the cold finality of a guillotine. "You ruined everything." He stared at the words, a bitter laugh catching in his throat. The sheer, breathtaking arrogance of it. She, the con artist. Her mother, the puppeteer. And he, the willing, blinded fool. He had been so mesmerized by the reflection she showed him of a powerful, virile man entering his glorious second act that he never bothered to look at what was behind the mirror. She hadn't loved him. She had loved the idea of him, and he had loved the idea of her. And now their shared illusion lay in ruins. He didn't bother to reply. He simply tossed the phone onto a sofa, the screen a tiny glowing accusation in the cavernous empty room. Miles away in the sun-drenched hills of Napa, A different reality was taking root. Esme Hollings awoke the morning after the party to the sound of birdsong, not buzzing phones. She stepped onto the veranda, a simple mug of coffee in her hands, and breathed in the scent of damp earth and distant wood smoke. The quiet was profound. It was the sound of her life, finally her own. She didn't gloat. She didn't grant the dozens of interview requests that flooded Arthur Sterling's office. She worked. She found Liam in the winery, his face still etched with a lingering disbelief from the previous night. Liam. She began her tone gentle but firm. I want to be very clear. I know how to appreciate fine wine, but I know next to nothing about how it's made. I'm not the kind of owner who will issue directives from a distance. I want to learn. I need you to teach me starting from the soil up. Liam, a man who had worked this land for 30 years and had seen owners come and go, looked at her for a long moment. He saw no arrogance, no pretense. He saw genuine curiosity. He gave a slow nod. All right, Miss Hollings. We'll start with the vines. Her days found a new rhythm, one dictated by the sun and the soil. She traded her tailored dresses for sturdy boots and her board meetings for long walks through the rows of grapes. She learned the subtle differences between the leaves of a Cabernet Sauvignon and a Merlot vine. The particular challenges of the clay-heavy soil on the western slope, the quiet language of the land. She reviewed the vineyard's operations with a keen eye. She fired the celebrity winemaker Jude had hired a man who spent more time on his personal branding than on the terroir. In his place, after reviewing dozens of resumes and dismissing the established names, she found Maria Flores. Maria was a young, fiercely intelligent UC Davis graduate whose thesis on biodynamic viticulture was considered both brilliant and rebellious. During their first meeting on the veranda, Maria spoke not of profit margins or market share, but of the microbiome of the soil and the soul of the grape. She saw winemaking not as manufacturing, but as a conversation with the land. In that moment, Esme knew she had found her partner. Together they made a bold decision. They began the painstaking, expensive process of uprooting acres of the high-yield, commercially safe grapes. Jude had favored preparing the land for new varietals that were riskier, but promised a wine of far greater character and complexity. It was an investment not in the next quarter, but in the next decade. And one crisp autumn afternoon, she sat at the large oak desk in the study and signed the final piece of paperwork. She was renaming the estate. Serenity Hills felt like a lie, a name chosen by Jude to represent a hollow piece he never possessed. She dipped the pen in ink and wrote in a clear, steady hand, Hollings Estate. It was not an act of ego. It was an act of reclamation, a tribute to the family, the name and the legacy that had been the silent, unacknowledged foundation of everything. 3 months after the party, Esme was sitting on that same veranda, the evening sun casting long shadows across the hills. A fire crackled in the outdoor hearth. She was tasting a sample from an old, forgotten barrel Maria had unearthed in the deepest corner of the cellar. Her phone buzzed beside her, and she saw it was Arthur. Esme, he said, his voice as calm as ever. I just got off the phone with Jude's counsel. They're ready to capitulate. He's offering a settlement. What are the terms? She asked, her eyes on the swirling garnet-colored wine in her glass. He'll plead to lesser charges of financial misrepresentation with the SEC, which will keep him out of prison, but will effectively bar him from ever running a public company again. He'll pay a catastrophic fine, and he will liquidate a significant portion of his remaining Nexus stock to transfer the full $50 million penalty for the NDA breach to an account of your choosing. In return, you agree to waive any further civil claims. Arthur paused. We could push for more, Esme. We could take almost everything that's left. Esme was quiet for a long moment. She thought of the years of quiet humiliation of being made to feel like an afterthought in her own life. The desire for absolute victory, for complete annihilation, was a tempting, dark whisper. But then she looked out at the rows of sleeping vines, at the land that was now hers, at the future she was building with her own 2 hands. Taking more of his money would keep them shackled together in a bitter dance of creditor and debtor. It would be a victory defined by him. She wanted a victory defined by her. "Take the deal, Arthur," she said, her voice clear and resolved. "Are you certain?" "Perfectly," she replied, a sense of profound peace settling over her like a warm blanket. "I don't want more of his money. I just want him out of my life and out of my vineyard." After she hung up, she raised the glass to her lips. The wine was extraordinary. It was a vintage from long ago neglected and left in the dark, but it had used that time to develop a stunning complexity. There were deep notes of dark cherry and earth, but also a surprising resilient finish that was both strong and gentle. It was a wine with a story of survival. A genuine smile, the first truly untroubled smile in years, graced her face. It was not the triumphant smirk of a conqueror. It was the quiet, contented smile of a woman who had fought a war not by razing her enemy's kingdom, but by painstakingly cultivating her own garden. She had won not by destroying her past, but by finally beautifully reclaiming her future. So what's the real lesson in the story of Jude Esme and the vineyard? It's a powerful reminder that true strength isn't always the loudest voice in the room. Sometimes it's the quiet, calculated patience of someone who knows their own worth. Esme Hollings didn't need to scream to be heard. She simply changed the facts on the ground. She bought the very stage her ex-husband was standing on and let his own ego do the rest. It's a story about the danger of underestimating people and the profound power of reclaiming your own narrative piece by piece. What would you have done in Esme's position? Would you have sought revenge, or would you have chosen peace? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We read every single one, and if you love stories about intricate drama, poetic justice and powerful comebacks, make sure you hit that like button. Share this video with a friend who appreciates a good story, and most importantly, subscribe to our channel for more true life dramas you won't want to miss. Thanks for listening.